My journey into activism and this healing space has been around seeing what the potential is for life and really wanting to build the mechanisms and make accessible for myself and others the ways of being that can actually help that to be manifested in the physical world.
It's not about having certificates. It's just about committing to learning together and sharing together and going on a journey. It's very hard to find safe spaces for dialogue. There is such a need for deeper questions, deeper exploration, especially with social media, everything reduced to a 3-word meme or even just an image.
Welcome, beautiful souls. Thank you to those of you who have written in after listening to last week's episode and what it has stirred in you, in your understanding of collective liberation, and how you have been changed by what you have seen on the global stage over the past weeks. We have a lot more to unpack here and a lot more to do, and I would like to find ways for us to come together more around this as a community. One thing that is alive for me is, as well as what we offer online, to find a way to host more in-person spaces where we can enter into deeper shifts together. I'm exploring this and hope to have some offerings for you next year, as well as a revamped online space. Come and be part of our membership space so we can dance together in this aliveness. I will be offering a new online course, Reclaim Your Intuition, by the end of the year, as I feel this is one of the skills we need most in these times to connect us in sovereignty, creativity, and vision, to ground us in our discernment. The way I have designed it is based in rituals and transmissions, so that your intuition becomes stronger as you move through it, and your connection with that which is bigger than you. I want to share with you these words from Audre Lorde. She says, "Tomorrow belongs to those of us who conceive of it as belonging to everyone, who lend the best of ourselves to it, and with joy." And these words from Bell Hooks, "One of the most vital ways we sustain ourselves is by building communities of resistance, places where we know we are not alone." My guests this episode are sisters Ruby and Christabel Reed, who are co-founding directors of the holistic wellbeing and transformative education platform Advaya, as well as co-founding directors of the initiative Earth charity, which runs the online nature skills platform Earthed and narrative campaign EcoResolution. Over the last 10 years, Ruby and Christabel have been building networks and bringing tens of thousands of people together in joyful spaces that reframe how we see the world around us and our role within it, so that we recognize our ecological relationality, fall more in love with life, and actively participate in its ecological and spiritual regeneration. They are focused on building the mechanisms that take people from awareness to action and which enable people to overcome any obstacles preventing them from living thriving lives in harmony with the natural living world. Advaya are prolific and exciting with their offerings, with so many beautiful courses that feature so many incredible luminaries, many of whom are part of this community and have been on this podcast. I myself was part of a beautiful course called The Call of the Wild Feminine, and also have shared the last couple of years on the Advaya stage at Medicine Festival. Advaya have recently launched their new Thrive Plus membership, where you get access to all their courses on topics such as animism, mycology, mythology, psychedelics, artificial intelligence, regenerative economics, spiritual ecology, and much more from a faculty of over 400 facilitators. I was at the Earth Summit in London recently, which was deeply inspiring to be amongst so many people including many young people who have such deep care for our ecologies and are embodying this as a way of life. In this episode, entitled Interconnected Learning, we explore the themes of transformative education, spirituality, and ecosystem restoration as we speak to the question, how can we learn and unlearn to bring forth cultural, personal, and planetary transformation? We hope this conversation awakens in you the ways that you can co-create a beautiful future and bring your visions into this world, inspired by what these beautiful women have to share. Welcome to All That We Are, with me, your host, Amisha Gadiali. On this show, we explore the weave between activism, the sacred, creativity, and regeneration, the spaces where our inner and outer worlds dance. From healing trauma to nature connection, to new technologies to ancient wisdom, it's time for us to move beyond silos and into an integrated way of being. Every one of us has ideas and personal experiences to share that can lead us to a more beautiful future. Despite the challenges we face as a global community or the pressures we meet in our daily lives, when we stop and dare to listen, to ask ourselves the big questions, and to share what we are already doing and envisioning, we create the futures of our wildest dreams. And we begin to embody all that we are becoming, and all that is possible. I am delighted to welcome you both, Ruby and Christabel, to All That We Are. Thank you for coming to share your wisdom.
Thanks for having us, Amisha.
Thank you, Amisha. It's so good to be here finally.
Ruby, can we start with you sharing the future of your wildest dreams? What is the world that you are creating?
Wow. Oh, the future of my wildest dreams is one of abundance, natural abundance, and biodiversity in its fullest form, with human communities living in alignment with the ecosystems where they are and which they are part of. Regenerative, nurturing economies between people and land. Spiritual alignment and faith and belief in something bigger than ourselves as individuals. And great joy, peace, and harmony among people and planet.
Beautiful. Christabel, will you share yours?
Yeah, it would be a world of kind of restored ecosystems, revitalized communities, and connected humans. But I don't believe that like idols exist and that it's always through like human participation that we can continue in like thriving spaces. They're never static. And so I guess in that vision is also humans, as Pat McCabe says, like upholding the honor of being human being through their active participation in being ecosystem engineers and community weavers and spiritually connected individuals who, as Ruby was saying, feel connected and excited and enchanted by what it means to be alive.
Yeah, we always ask about vision because I believe that it's important for us to consider like what is possible, and also for then that to be something that upholds our understanding of how to participate and to know what we're moving towards. And so thank you for sharing your visions. Would you like to tell us about Advaya and how this came into being?
Advaya was started in 2015 when Ruby and I wanted to create a space, an event, and with a bunch of other friends as well, actually, where we could start to explore kind of inner and outer healing and transformation based on the idea that the health of the planet and health of people are two sides of the same coin. So we wanted to create an event where we could weave together music and food and inspiring talks, as well as healing workshops, to pull in different kinds of people and create a space where we could be learning, celebrating, and healing together. That one event then transformed into Advaya, which then transformed into, like hundreds and hundreds of events all the way up until COVID, when we shifted all of our in-person events online and have been running online learning journeys. And what we're wanting to do through Advaya is to explore our interconnected existence, to platform the many different ways of being in which we can be connected to our deepest or most authentic selves, to each other, and to the natural world. So we take a very relational perspective to healing and transformation, where it's not about this is a problem and we need to fix it over there, or I am the problem and I need to fix myself, but it's more looking at how can we heal our relationship with ourselves, with others, with spirit, and with nature. And in so doing, sort of stop this polarization and separateness of the problems, either all about me or it's all about the world. And actually, these are two entwined journeys that we can go on around healing. I'll pass to you, Ruby.
Yeah, I would just add about sharing, both in terms of building community as well as sharing and learning from people with other perspectives and experience and wisdom. And that was always very much at the heart as well. When we started Advaya, we didn't know any spaces that were like what we were doing. We'd both been on different journeys and kind of came together with this desire to create a space that reflected our kind of visions and our own personal journeys. It was a time where there wasn't much conversation around the interconnection between inner and outer change. There was the wellbeing space, which was very much inward looking, and then the activism space where there was so much burnout. So we really wanted to try and weave together these different ways of being in the world as inseparable from each other and as one. We had been reading books by Satish Kumar and similar people, and they'd had such a big impact on how we understood the world, and then moving away from, in our early 20s and teens, it was a particular type of lifestyle that wasn't regenerative and it wasn't constructive. At the time, actually, there was Morning Gloryville. I remember I'd never actually been, but it was the first space. It was kind of like a sober space that I'd heard about. I was like, wow, that's so cool. So it was kind of bridging together these different things with learning and fun. And we always had music and workshops, like Christabel said.
Can you share more around your own personal journeys with spirituality and with activism, and what led you to that point to devote yourselves to set up something like this?
I worked very hard at school and was quite academic, and I really struggled in my teenage years. It was a lot of my friends, it was like a lot of drug taking and very self-destructive behavior patterns. I was always curious about yoga. I remember one of my mum's friends coming with this David Swenson Ashtanga book and copying the poses from the book on the garden lawn when I was 13 years old, and then buying books from Waterstones and just copying the poses, but not really understanding what yoga was, or what the poses were, or how to connect the poses, just doing triangles in the garden. And then and then we went to India when I was 16 and became more interested and started to practice more regularly. And that was a really important part of my life. When I was 23, was a very dedicated Ashtanga practitioner for 6 years, practicing every morning at the Shala, going to Mysore to practice with Sharat, which is Patabi Joyce's grandson. And it really, for the first teenage years until early 20s, practicing yoga wasn't really doing it. Then suddenly something clicked and was like, wow, that's the breath. Wow, that's our connection with something bigger than ourselves. And it just had this incredibly profound shift on my understanding of myself and and the world around me, and particularly the natural world. I was very in my 20s really struggling. I pushed everyone away. It became very, very internal and very, very dedicated to practice and to being in nature. So I would go on lots of solo trips and camping, and was into diving and free diving, I was teaching scuba diving in the Andaman Islands and go on these like quite wild trips. I think out of a way to push people away, and then my practices became very hard and extreme. And Advaya happened in 2015. On that process, like, it's been an incredible journey of learning and a healing journey for myself as well. And when I think about myself now versus the person I was when we started Advaya, I'm like a complete opposite ends of the spectrum, particularly when it comes to like relationships and my human relationships within community. And that having been so fearful, I think, of like intimacy and using my spiritual practices as a way to like protect myself, I think through all of the learnings I have been able to understand how to integrate these different aspects of life and how to use our spiritual practice to play a beautiful role in the world around us, and particularly when it comes to community and people and how we then live in the natural world through that.
I think very different to Ruby in that at the very start, it was always very much about kind of other people. Like, you know, my journey into environmental activism actually really started about, you know, how can my friends or family and those around me and myself live like the happiest, healthiest life. And then through the practice of yoga, realizing it's about removing the obstacles, you know, in the glacier that are preventing us from being wholly connected to our clarity. And then learning about the ecological crisis and how that is literally removing the foundations that enable anyone to even have the very basis of a happy and healthy life with access to clean water, air, and food. So it started in a very sort of human oriented individual life space. And I also struggled and still do struggle with very bad anxiety. And so practicing yoga from 18 and realizing like, oh, you know, the reason why I feel this way isn't because of what someone did to me or what people have done to me or XYZ. It's actually something like deep within my system and something that I will live with forever, but also practice with and understand forever. And so that took me on like a deep journey of self-practice and healing. And through that had, you know, what felt like very profound spiritual experiences of like physically sort of realizing and understanding like how interconnected our existence was and about consciousness and beauty and becoming like viscerally aware of the fact that of how I was living and how my friends was living and how the cultures I live within are living, and then what our human potential is. And I think just deep down, I see that as such an exciting prospect of like, okay, well, I can be reasonably happy and we can be reasonably happy right now. But imagine where we could be if we did this, this, and this and shifted our worldviews in this, and this way. So I guess, yeah, my journey into kind of activism and this healing space has been around like seeing what the potential is for life and really wanting to build the mechanisms and make accessible for myself and others the ways of being that can actually help that to be manifested in the physical world.
And what you've created over the last 8 years is so incredible. So many events and courses. And I imagine at this point, people that have met through Advaya and collaborated more, and so many different themes. I'm curious if you can share more around that process of curation and how the ideas that become courses or events come together for you.
It's very much reflective often of our own personal journeys as well, where we see there being a need. Like, we're often responding to often an intuitive sense of cultural direction. But ultimately, like at the core of everything we're doing is like recognizing our interconnected realities so that we can come into better balance in terms of our relationships with self, other, and the natural world. And then every course we do is just a different way of exploring that same thing, whether it's gesturing towards decolonial futures course we did around sensing harm by design and how the systems are built that we're part of are built by around harm as this central tenet, and how do we then work with that as the reality to move beyond when it comes to decolonization work, for example, on one hand, or whether it's a course on joy in the body, where we're thinking about how we can live the most utmost joyful lives by starting at how we relate with our own physical self, our physical beings. So we go from the systemic to the very, very personal, but whatever end of the spectrum, it's exploring this nugget that's at the core of Advaya and what even Advaya means. Advaya means non-duality. And this is something so important to us, and then how we do it is often through including as many voices as possible, because we want to go beyond the idea of this kind of primary singular voice or singular teacher celebrity figure and move towards multiplicity and diversity of voices, because that's the only way we'll ever get close to having a real sense of the depths of these things anyway. And so I'd say that is the guiding force of programming. And then when we find someone who's particularly inspiring, who looks at these things from a particularly new way, or we come to a particular idea, then we'll find a curator or a speaker or someone who feels really called to share that. Now we say that the guiding, the three areas that we explore with Advaya are ecology, consciousness, and the body. The body really comes into ecology, but we just wanted to make it personal as possible, and as human and somatic as possible.
And the reason why we explore those places is then for sort of cultural, personal, and planetary transformation. So that's the direction that we were always wanting to move in. But the areas that we explore are then ecology, consciousness, and the body.
When we made a shift from individual events to courses, and then we recently launched the membership, it's been this gradual progression of realizing that it's an ongoing life's journey. Learning is a life's journey and sharing with others is a life's journey. When we started the courses, we thought we were answering the problem of just doing one-off events. And then we realized doing one-off courses, whether they're 6 weeks or 3 months or 9 months, is just the same. So then we're now doing long-term memberships as part of a bigger body of work, and really see that this is the ask now. And it's not about having certificates. It's just about committing to learning together and sharing together and going on a journey of hearing different perspectives. And in a time of the world like we're in now, where it's so difficult to hear different perspectives because we're so in our echo chambers, it's very hard to find safe spaces for dialogue. And it feels like there is such a need for deeper questions, deeper exploration, especially with social media, everything being reduced to kind of memes, entire concepts, ideas, political perspectives being reduced to a 3-word meme or even just an image. And we see Advaya as an antidote to that. I mean, we love a meme, but it's not really going to get us where we need to be. So it's just this depth and also this role of long-term community support. And
it's so powerful. I love the invitation to be part of something where we're continuing to learn, where we know that everything is evolving so quickly. The way that we are seeing and understanding things is shifting so rapidly that having a space where that invitation is really there to keep exploring and to really remain very fluid. And it feels very different to the kind of learning that we would have experienced at school, for example, which is very much here is some information, memorize it, now you know that. and of course, what we've now discovered is that a lot of that information isn't even true. It's one very specific perspective. And so this invitation to remain open and to acknowledge that we are really quite magnificent beings, and we are capable of continually expanding our perspectives and unlearning and seeing things in a different way and understanding ourselves in a different way.
Completely. And that's really what we want to do with Advaya, is be able to provide a space for like much deeper learning, more long-term learning. Advaya is really a space for people who have already begun, within an environmental activist space, or on a sort of self-development journey, or a social justice journey, or like someone who's already been investing time and energy into inner and outer transformation, because it's not surface level what Advaya talks about. It's like, all the courses are done live via Zoom, and then you can catch up if you need in your own time. But it enables people to really drop in, drop down in ways that you couldn't really put down in a sort of book or like a 90-minute pre-recorded, course type of thing. And yes, we really want to, by like transformative education and transformative learning, what we mean is like learning that aims to go beyond the surface. And of course, though, with that means not just staying up in the headspace with lots of ideas and being able to wax lyrical about, all different types of kind of like big, lofty topics, but to be able to start to embody that and to practice that on a daily basis. And I think, that is absolutely essential. Ruby mentioned about Instagram before, and you really see like how unbelievably toxic the space of Instagram is, to the point where sometimes it makes me question why we even, like, I don't know, why even bother. Just what a weird vacuum that place is, and how difficult it is to be able to continually show up and communicate about what we're doing and why we're doing it. Yeah, it can be really hard. So I think what we're so excited about in having this like new membership and the new platform is really invest in like the community of lifelong learners who we're going on this journey with. Yeah, it feels really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I completely share your feelings on Instagram and often consider completely deleting it. And then, yeah, get kind of pulled back in by that notion of connection and community, and also having built something there where I have a platform, people will listen and it's sort of also like, okay, I know that by deleting Instagram, it just means I'm going to spend more time like out in the trees. And then it's kind of what Ruby was saying at the beginning, that then, I'm good. I'm out there with my tree friends, but then not as actively participating. And I feel like we're all hungry for better ways of actively participating and kind of knowing how we can really show up for these times. And the other thing that just really struck me when you're talking about Instagram is that I just also feel like the ways in which we communicate these days, text messages and even voice notes, like every single conflict or misunderstanding that I've had relationally in the last few years has all happened through a text message or something that's been taken the wrong way or taken out of context, or perhaps it's, I sent something whilst I was in the middle of something and I wasn't fully like anchored and present, and then it was read by somebody that was feeding a baby that was also not fully reading it properly, and then suddenly you're in this space where like more meaning is put into something that wasn't there, which just doesn't happen when you're talking to someone face to face, and it doesn't happen on the phone. And so I feel like there's something there for us to really consider at this time of how we communicate. And I feel like because we are in touch with so many people and in so many different places, and we're so used to this like method now, it's a time for us to learn how to master these tools better.
Definitely. I think one of the big issues with it is how individuals, humans, are using it to build up themselves or their organizations as a brand. People kind of forget that there's like human beings behind these accounts who, it can be like a very catty, sort of like low frequency space, like in the way that people are using it, whilst also at the same time being this incredible tool for communication and collaboration and learning in a way that is decentralized, supposedly decentralized. But I think there's also such a lack of personalization, which obviously does happen through any kind of digital realms like this. But yeah, I find it such a bizarre performative space with so much ego and judgment. It's a place that we do obviously inhabit. It's essential for us to be able to share the work of Earth and of Advaya, but it's also a place that like I really cannot take too seriously.
Yeah, obviously it's not decentralized, but anyone can create a platform. Anyone can create a platform for themselves, but it's not decentralized because of the monetization aspects and it being like Meta or whatever else that owns it. But for me, one of the really problematic things is when someone's validity is equated to their following on Instagram. And a lot of the people with the big followings on Instagram who are standing as healers or voices on climate or whatever, bit like cultural leaders, have really good marketing backgrounds and recently decided to become a voice on a platform. And they have no real depth of understanding of the problems. And then often you'll be at an event and there'll be a climate panel, and it's just people with big Instagram followings, not really experts, and they're positioned as experts. Or similarly, something to do with spirituality or something to do with like psychedelic therapy, whatever it is. And I think that is a massive problem. And it's not just in Instagram though; it's cultural, and it's also book deals are given to people if they've got big followings. If that's a sign of the future, I think it's very, very worrying. I guess what will happen is there'll be a natural way that we understand how to identify integrity versus not, like especially now with AI and ChatGPT and everything entering the game as well. It's like just adding another layer to the mix. Like I don't think everybody's talking about AI taking over the world, like how we know the difference between fake and reality, and it's like we already don't know the difference between fake and reality. It's not going to make much difference to what's already going on now. It's like to talk about cyborgs, we're already living like cyborgs. We're all living as augmented humans, augmented beings. So we will understand how to identify. Right now, I think we're just in a bit of chaos.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much around who and what the algorithms favor as well, and who and what they allow to be big, as well as who has the marketing spend and all of that. I mean, I know a lot of people that already like write their posts, like ChatGPT writes their posts, and you wouldn't even imagine that that's that's like true. And I guess we're being asked to really root deeper into our intuition to be able to discern integrity, to be able to really connect to what are like the values and intentions of somebody, and also the knowledge and the wisdom that they're holding. Yeah, I'm curious if you've had that experience as a curator of kind of picking people and then being like, oh gosh, like, this was this was more of somebody that has the big following rather than like, or if you feel that you have, as Advaya, kind of understood how to bring really incredible people. All of the people that I know that are on the Advaya platform are amazing, and many of them have been on the podcast and are personal friends of mine. But I wonder if you've had that experience.
We don't normally work with people with massive followings. We don't try not to work with people with massive followings. We just generally find that the people that are really looking at what we want to look at just don't have massive Instagram followings. Maybe they've written an amazing book, but they don't have a massive Instagram following. And maybe we'd be in a much like better position as a brand or whatever if we did only work with people with massive Instagram followings. like that's not something we've really focused on. But what I wanted to add when it comes to like wisdom, what you were just talking about, Amisha, is the real test is when you're together in the flesh. That's where I feel like these spaces are going to become more and more and more and more important and more and more and more and more sacred as we go into so much online. And that transition into the human and the lived experience of values into that and of sharing the ideas into that space is where you really understand the strength of a facilitator, strength of the message, the integrity of the container. Somebody's presence on Instagram is very different to their ability to hold a space in person.
I'm curious, as Advaya is so prolific, you are there like collaborating in so many different spaces and festivals and with your courses and with other events, and you have Earthed, which we will come into in a moment. I'm wondering how you both really resource yourselves to hold all of this space and to hold everything that you are creating a platform for.
Well, there'll be completely different answers, but I do feel like I have an infinite resilience and resource and energy. So that's kind of something that Ruby and I share, where I feel like so long as we're doing it together, we'll just be able to do it. Like, and it'll be fine. It might not be perfect, but like, it's going to be great. However it kind of turns out. So we're like not perfectionists, and we just think we can just keep going, going, going. But then the reality is that it is also really hard to be actually resourcing yourself, and it's something that I'm wanting to like really spend time sitting with now, where, you know, after 8 years of just going, 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 and now actually having two organizations, separate organizations that need, you know, all the nurturing and love that and energy that they need. Like, how is it possible to do that? And also to be ensuring that carving out space and time to be fully present, like to my relationships with myself and with my friends and with my family and with nature. Because the reality is that now it's sort of, you know, 12 to 14 hours every day working in front of a laptop, and just so, you know, and ridiculous amounts of meetings. Like, I love it. And I love work, but I also know that I don't have an infinite amount of energy. And if I'm not really resourcing myself and ensuring that I'm having space for like spiritual connection, whether that's within community or with nature or myself, then I'm going to hit a point where I'm just, well, you know, where I'll just get sick, basically. I think it's something that is complex because I don't really believe in balance. Like I said at the start, I don't really believe in utopia, or like balance is something that you strike. Everything needs like human participation. There's never going to be a sort of balanced life that's just sort of naturally occurs because you've managed to sort out your hours of working and hours of this. Like, I mean, maybe that is possible for some people, but I can't even imagine it. I feel like balance is something that shifts and changes all the time. And like, the balance is the balance of what's needed in that moment. And sometimes it's going to be heavy, like intense work. And other times it's going to be like a lot of time with friends and family, or a lot of time with yourself. And I think that can be balanced, as well as sort of a third of the time I'm going to spend doing this and a third of the time I'm going to spend doing that.
I think we can all relate to not having worked out how to perfectly put everything into neat boxes and finish at the same time every day. And I feel like that in itself is even an idea that is like of white supremacy, that life can be so neat, especially when we're responding to a planet in crisis. And we have so many different aspects that we're tending to. And sometimes it means staying up really late because something's happening and you want to give energy to it. Sometimes it means making that space to go and be outside and be in nature. Ruby, how is that for you, this dance?
Well, I loved Christabel's answer. I haven't heard that you don't believe in balance, but now I don't really know either.
Me neither.
It's probably our problem.
I don't believe in busyness. Because when someone says, oh, I'm really busy, like, we're all really busy. Like, we're busy living, we're busy breathing, we're busy walking around, we're busy, like, we're talking about balance being like something you strike. Like, I think also busyness is just a state of mind. It's like you're choosing to be caught up in like the how of what you're doing rather than what you're doing. Like, you're choosing to be distracted from the presence of doing the thing. If we choose to ignore those concepts and just do what we're doing as best as we can without being perfectionists and without being too attached to the outcomes and just trying our best, and trying to do everything because we love it with as much joy as possible, with the best people we know, then there's abundance of energy. And I also agree with Christabel. Like, I really feel that everything is possible as long as you've got the right people to do it with and have so much energy for this work. Yeah, I love it. When it comes to resourcing, I hate working on the computer though, and I hate being on my laptop all day. But at the same time, it's kind of for something bigger and better than that. But what I do as antidote is spend a lot of time outside and a lot of time with my friends. That's the most important thing to me. I go swimming, try and swim every day in the sea with goggles, so I see under the water surface the whole magic of that world, with the like seaweeds and the rocks and the fish and the light and the reflections, and immerse myself in something different, like an altered state without any after effects. Swimming, ocean time, and celebrating my friendships.
The most important part of resourcing myself spiritually is through the lessons learned from the Bhagavad Gita, which you can read as a treatise of how to act in the world. That's kind of why it was written, to get a balance between like Brahmanism and also like intrinsic asceticism, where people were leaving society. So how can you reach in spiritual liberation whilst participating in the materialist sort of social world? The lessons of non-attachment is probably the backbone of why I personally have been able to continue as we've been working and to kind of manifest so much in the past 8 years, is because I feel that we're just doing everything we can, but also want to, in order to work towards these sort of thriving futures and cultures in harmony with nature and ourselves and spirit. But the only way I can do that is if I'm completely unattached to the fruits of the action. So if we're working, on a new Advaya course, but overly concerned about, is it going to land, and are we going to get the ticket sales we need to cover the costs? And, what about the future? And what about, like success, and what does that mean? And like all of that is what burns, I think, people out. It's like the over attachment to the fruits of the action, when actually really the energy needed is in the creation and in the intention of it. And then really deeply knowing that everything will work out exactly as it's meant to, even if it means bankruptcy or whatever else it would be. No, joking, not bankruptcy, but you know what I mean? Like you just do what you know you need to do without worrying about it all the time. Similarly, with Earth, like running a charity is like super intense and really scary all the time. And you're so reliant on individuals' generosity that it can be hard to track and know. The past 18 months, I've really struggled more than I have done since we first started, because I've become overwhelmed with the responsibility. When it was just Ruby and I running things, I could say, oh, well, just whatever happens will happen. And, and then actually then you have a lot of responsibility to 2 different teams and ensuring that everyone has the support and everything that they need. And I think that's where I start to struggle, because my natural inclination is to be, my anxiety is rooted in human relationships and ensuring that I am giving as much as I can to the people around me. And as soon as I feel like I'm not doing that, I start to get very anxious and stressed. So I think that's where I can resource myself, but also where I personally then end up burning myself out and needing to heal or work on those areas.
The 2 things that really I want to celebrate is just your love for each other as sisters, and the way in which you support each other, and being, sisters, not just in like, the sisters way, but actually birth sisters, and therefore each other really, really well. And I imagine that's a really interesting dance, but to be able to bring that power of your relationship into the world. And it does seem to be part of what's behind how powerful and successful the work that you have been doing together is. And the other thing that came through for me when you were speaking was just the permission to go too far in one direction, and just to follow like that that kind of inner flame, and sometimes that does lead to a bit of burnout, or sometimes that does mean taking on too much, or sometimes that means not quite showing up enough here, but then being able to sort of to go in a direction and then to reflect and then to find like the next action from there.
I think one of the things behind both those, well, firstly with with being sisters is being sisters and like genuinely not feeling kind of any competition and being able to just work so intuitively and fluidly with someone without any like power struggle or feelings of, you're not doing enough. I think what we both know about each other is that we're both really kind of hard workers, and like we're always doing everything that we can do to make something what we said we wanted it to be. So I think those enable kind of the relationship to just be just really sort of nourishing and expansive, and is also why Advaya and Earth also have a feeling of sort of not having too much ownership over a particular space, but really, really, really always wanting to be as collaborative as possible rather than like really pushing a particular brand or whatever it is.
Thank you for tuning in. If you are enjoying this episode, do join our membership. For a small contribution, you can be part of our community where we deepen the conversation and offer spaces of learning and embodiment. As a member, you are a patron supporting the making of this show, keeping the episodes full length, free and accessible for all. And you receive a number of benefits such as monthly soul space, going deeper sessions, access to our library of workshops, and discounts on all our online and in-person experiences. Our membership is what makes us able to make this show and stay advertising free in a world that is always trying to sell us stuff we don't need. Head to allthatweare.org/membership to find out more and join today. I would love to hear more about Earthed. Before you tell us what it is, I would love to know why you wanted to create a completely different organization and why the work that you're doing with Earth didn't come under Advaya.
It wasn't intentionally done that way. It was one of those organic things that we do that just sort of grow and develop into something. But essentially when we were running Advaya in 2019, I was having a conversation with like a really good friend who I was living with. I was living with her, who has a big platform, and she was saying she wanted to get involved in the environmental space, but felt like she couldn't because she was a famous model and had worked in for fast fashion, etc., and flown around the world. And I was saying, sure, but if all the people with the biggest platforms who have been like big polluters in different ways feel that they can't speak to the environmental and social crises because of hypocrisy, like that is a problem with narrative rather than with the reality, because we are all part of the problem, which is obviously then on the spectrum. So we worked with her on EcoResolution, and that was with Cara Delevingne. And then through EcoResolution, we set up the charity Initiative Earth. And so because Earth is now under that charity structure, rather than like Advaya, they're just legally separate, but they are very much two sides of the same coin, spiritually and conceptually. In that Advaya is about how do we transform our relationships? Like, what are the stories? What are the narratives? What are the spiritual practices and embodied practices and ways of being that enable us to step into this thriving life paradigm? Then EcoResolution was very much about kind of daily climate action. After that, we transitioned to Earth, which is about practical ecosystem restoration skills. So yeah, now they are legally separate, but spiritually like two sides of the same coin.
It also, with Earth, it's very much about, like Christabel said, skills and practical tools. And it's really about stripping back concepts in a way, and theory. And it grew out of the COVID pandemic binary, really extreme polarization, that climate and reality, and thinking like, wow, this is really quite like scary reality that we can't bring people together. Like, how are we going to bring people together to create the change that's needed in the world, particularly when it comes to like ecosystem collapse, and everybody's arguing over like carbon or not carbon, and it's just, you're just losing the thread, becoming so detached from the reality and what we actually need to be doing, which is getting as many people actively engaged in restoring their ecosystems as possible. And there are so many other like voices out there who are pushing for other things because they've got agendas. So it could be like corporate lobbies or similar who are wanting to sell you something because that will be their climate solution, where it's just like techno fixes and like financialization of a disaster to create profit so that somebody else can profit from it, rather than seeing, and like often with good intention, but they've still got a profit motive. So even if it's a good intention, it's like there is an ulterior motive there. And so we thought like, well, everybody is a natural human being. Most people look fondly at the natural living world when you take out concepts and political viewpoints. Most people want to play a role in keeping it or restoring it or regenerating it or enabling their children to have access to it or having access to it themselves, etc. And so we thought Earth could be an incredible tool to really bring all these different people together around something that's hard to separate over, like planting a tree, restoring a riverbank, planting wildflowers, and by really focusing on the tools and the skills. Advaya is very deep thinking, and it's looking at like systems and structures and asking questions around consciousness and like how our like scientific paradigms and how they affect how we see the world. And like it's not for everybody. And we wanted to try and think about how could we speak to as many people as possible and get as many people as possible on board with something that's very tangible and specific, as is ecosystem restoration.
And how do people engage with Earth, and what can they take part in, and how does it help them to connect deeper to the ecosystems that they are in?
So on the platform, anyone can donate what they feel on a monthly basis in order to access short courses that are 60 to 90 minutes long, broken up into 10-minute modules. They're all filmed in situ, so they're very high quality. Currently, we've got 12, but we've got another 30 that we've filmed and that we're releasing every 2 weeks. So this is everything from how to restore your local river with Paul Powsland, or how to transform an urban garden into a food garden with Alessandro Vitali, or it is around Maori Indigenous land stewardship with Jessica Hutchins, or soil regeneration with Nicole Masters. And so they're filmed around the world. And yeah, you can watch the courses. There's like downloadable PDFs. There's a community backend. As we grow, member donations will establish the action fund from which members can apply for the grants they need to start and scale their own ecosystem restoration projects. So really what Earth is trying to do is practically remove the obstacles that are preventing a mass mobilized, peer-driven, widespread ecosystem restoration movement of people actively participating in the regeneration of community well-being, which is attached to the well-being and flourishing of their local ecosystems.
How have you seen so far, I know it's really early days, but how have you seen that relationship changing through people being more connected in this way?
It's hard to know now. We literally just launched it, but we've got just over 1,000 people signed up now to the platform, which is great. And we haven't really started sort of marketing beyond our organic channels. So that feels really, really wonderful. And we're just about to start doing a sort of research with the members about what the journey's been, so we can really start to track like the distance someone goes. But essentially what we want is for Earth to be a sort of go-to place for anyone who enters a new environment or within their own environment and says, how can I bring more life to this place? What are the traditional skills that people used to have known but which are no longer passed down? I mean, we've worked in environmentalism and ecology for nearly 10 years, and it was only this year that I actually grew my grew the first food I'd ever grown before and watched it transform from a seed. And I think that is bizarre and a real, a real sort of sign of actually whilst being so connected and so dedicated, how disconnected you can be to the world that you're trying to create, wanting to create, because you get so busy in the doing and the amplifying, the storytelling and the building and the blah, 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 that you're actually not even planting seeds and, you know, watching that transformation occur. So that was really, really cool.
And it's not that uncommon as well that people that are doing a lot of the environmental activism work, that are spending huge amounts of times in meetings and on computers, don't have a flourishing garden of plants or house plants that they're growing, of food. And yeah, this work feels really important to bridge that gap and to help us all live much more embodied in our relationship with the earth.
Of course. And I mean, it's no shame of, obviously, I mean, to myself or to anyone. Yeah, I really do believe that everyone is doing their best, like really doing their best. But I think, you know, what I feel really passionate about is like, how do we make it as accessible and easy and like beautiful and joyful as possible to access these skills, to mobilize and work with community, to explore different ways of being. I think the big thing that like and passion and what drives the work that I do is about making all these beautiful ways of being accessible and in some ways aspirational, as in, you know, they are held within culture as like something for us all to be working towards, rather than a sort of weird alternative space on the side.
I think it's just interesting to think about entry points and how we all can come to a shared place from a different starting point, and not judging those starting points. Perhaps sometimes we get into problems when it comes to change making work or activism work or whatever we want to call it, where there is judgment held over someone for being who they are when they come to make their first steps, make their changes. And it's really important to be open and as inclusive as possible, because what's got someone to a point of thinking of where they are now isn't necessarily going to be their thinking forever. And so welcoming people with different views, like going on a journey of active participation together, particularly around like connection with everything apart from that person's individual self. So like connection with, or sense of self. So connection with the natural living world through growing vegetables and fruits, or connection with other people through doing that together with them, or connection with their own spiritual being through in the process of doing all of that together. That's what I find really exciting about the Earth platform, but also about Advaya and about our work generally. It's just really trying not to pigeonhole people too much, and to be open to people who are starting at different points and whose practices until now might not be aligned necessarily with our own.
That feels so important in this time where there's so much cancelling, so much of othering of people, and often within like really actually the same realm, but it might be that there's just a practice that's slightly different or a perspective that's slightly different, and people can be quite like, oh, like that's not kind of where it is. And I feel like this work of calling everyone in within diversity, and also with a recognition that we're all living under the same systems of oppression, and we're all on that path of understanding them and liberation and creating something different for our future. But that means that we are all implicit in all of these systems of oppressions. We've all experienced them, and they have influenced us in different ways. And so we are going to be coming in from such different places, but that this work of active participation and of wanting to be part of something that is better for our future and for our children means that we have to learn how to connect with each other, no matter where we're coming from. And so thank you so much for bringing that into the conversation.
Thank you, Amisha. I think many truths can exist. Like, that's something that I think a lot of people are recognizing or saying now. At the same time, when is someone's truth causing harm and suffering and oppression? That can be a fine line, or it can be a very big, they can be very far apart. Understanding where that line is and moving away from it as much as possible is very, very important. There are many truths and many perspectives, and they can often be existing side by side.
Yeah, I think that's something that we really want to be like platforming through Advaya, is being able to really embrace complexity and nuance, and a space for people to ask questions. I mean, it really is such an insight, working in like behind the scenes of Advaya, just how quick people are to just totally blow up about something that was taken out of context. And often it's people that, like, it'll also be people that work in like the healing, the kind of anti-cancel culture space. I think it's interesting. I think it's a sign of just how sort of tense and difficult the times are. But I also think that there needs to be some, like, I don't know, some sort of spaciousness and ability for people to ask questions in a way that isn't also trying to build up identity. I think that's where I start to really struggle with cancel culture is, are you doing this to address an issue and to understand why it's happened? And also in the process of so doing, further establishing who you are and what your identity is, because then it stops being about the collective and it stops being about liberation and it stops being about getting to the root of the problem. And instead it's about building up the personal identity and the personal brand that people display through social media. So kind of going back to what I was saying before, where I find that plays a toxic place because there's a lot of speaking truth to power. But when that is then connected with the building of one's identity so that they can be on the speaker circuit, so, it kind of then slots into this like ego driving careerist space. And when it's so sort of negatively oriented, and about sort of pointing to all the people whose fault everything is, rather than actually pointing to where the beautiful solutions are and the active participation and work people are doing to not just dismantle the old and the decrepit and the obsolete, but to actually build what the alternative is. That's what we really hope to be doing through Earth and through Advaya, is creating mechanisms whereby we're not just talking about the problem, or actually trying to talk about it not so much, because I have a feeling that actually there's enough people in the world who understand about the problems that we face and understand why they're being created. But the real obstacle is not awareness. It's about the ability to act on that awareness and to move from the radical imagination to like the manifested reality, or to help people create their own pathways by removing obstacles to manifest that. So yeah, my feeling around cancel culture is it just feels the complete antithesis to that. The amount of times, I've seen people attack other people who actually have just got their phone numbers. And it's like, if you really thought that, I mean, if you really care, give them a call or send them a message and have a conversation, rather than pasting it over your Instagram to build yourself up while you take other people down. I think it's just the antithesis of where we hope to be going and what people say that they're working towards as well.
Yeah, it's symptomatic of this culture, though, of platform building around like a value system, because then cancel culture goes hand in hand with self-righteousness. And it's easy to critique. I love to critique. It's easy to critique things, and it's much harder to actively participate in creating alternatives, because you have to put yourself out on the line to maybe be critiqued and cancelled yourself. I think critique is important. It's important to understand. And then once we understand, we can then focus on the next steps, which is the important work.
Yeah, there's something around these times, and I feel like, activism, for as long as I've been part of it, of that, like knowing how and what's enough and what's the right way. And I feel like in the time that I've been in this space, like 20 odd years, the language keeps changing. And then if you're not using the most recent up-to-date language, then suddenly like, you know, what you say doesn't matter anymore. And it's very hard to keep on top of everything. And I feel like we've created a culture where people are also scared to ask about the things that they don't understand, because if they ask about it in the wrong way and they use some of the wrong words, that they might cause more harm, and they might upset people, and they might be judged for not already knowing about that. And so creating these safe spaces where people can learn and unlearn is so important. And I don't know, I mean, my experiences of speaking truth to power are that it's not that fun. It's not fun. You get a lot that comes back on you. It's a lot to handle, especially if you don't have enough support around you. You don't have enough padding around you and resources around you to kind of hold you through that. And so it's also really interesting that it is such a kind of fashionable thing when it is something that's really, really difficult. And I feel like, going back to where we started with this conversation, with you sharing about your spiritual journeys and your yoga journeys, that for me, having a practice that I can keep coming back to, that makes my inner world strong, that anchors me into discernment, that makes my field a little bit more clear, that really does change my experience of life and of the way that I'm able to show up. And so, yeah, really remembering how important it is that we bring that attention to our bodies and to our practice and to that strengthening and that clarity and that discernment, as well as getting our hands in the earth, as well as understanding the bigger concepts and how we can be part of it. And that's what's so powerful about your work and everything that you share, is that you are expressing it in all of those different ways.
Yeah. I think at the core, it has to be spiritual if it's going to be sustainable. Like, it has to be something more than a concept or just a great idea, to not burn out and to truly trust and believe and to have vision and direction. It's like a spiritual task and a spiritual act. And life is a spirit. Like, if we choose to live, that's a spiritual choice as well. I guess it depends on your perspective, but I truly think it is. And I think when you come from that point, you can also understand that the role you play doesn't mean that you yourself have to change the world, but it's just stepping up each day in alignment with the values that you see serving the greater whole, the greater good. Or good isn't a word I really like to use, but like service. Then I think that's the beginning. And sometimes I think we get overwhelmed thinking that we have to be doing so much, but just by living in alignment with these values, I think you're already doing a lot.
Yeah, I'd also love to add, just going back, Amisha, to what you were saying about that clarity and discernment. I mean, you know, one of the total roots and reasons why people practice yoga practice is because it's the daily practice that enables you to root out the 5 kleshas of anger, fear, ego, delusion, and desire. It's only through daily practice and practice with a teacher who can see when you're actually doing that and when you're actually doing the opposite, that you're able to slowly remove the klesha so that the light can increase and the clarity can increase. And I think something that we see so much of, Ruby and I were both yoga therapists, and so the type of teaching that we would do for students and clients would be, you know, very like gradual, very connected to the individual, very much about that like removal of klesha, in comparison to sort of big group classes and big yoga studios or very extreme practices with people who've never done any practice before and who have an incredible experience in, say, Kundalini or even, you know, in the psychedelic realms of like with ayahuasca, and they leave feeling like, oh, I feel amazing and I feel this and that and this. But actually, you're having an incredible intense experience. But I don't believe that real clarity that you can live through comes through extreme experience. But I actually think it comes more from daily spiritual practice, the coming back to practice and the removing of the cliche, if that makes sense. So I really hope to see sort of in the realms that we live in, people veering away from sort of just having to have these intense experiences towards actually integrating simple but specific practice into their daily lives that enables them to really cultivate discernment, because that is what is needed more than anything. We have such an abundance of fire and such an abundance of like air, and we really need to be like grounding our spiritual practices in quite boring but also hopefully beautiful ways.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in dedicated long-term practice as well. Yeah, I see the value in like unique experiences that can help us see a window of something that we could never have imagined seeing, unless it's then anchored in practice or community support. I don't think it will create the change that you expect it to change. Like a trip to the rainforest where you see interconnected life or psychedelic experience or something, if it stands alone without being embedded within a long-term committed practice of daily dedication, or within, like I said, many other people supporting you, surrounding you, like as a role of integration, then I think it will remain as a unique experience that will give you a viewpoint of what was possible, but it's not necessarily going to be how you're going to be living.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the small and the committed and the everyday that really allows us to integrate everything and to really strengthen our vessels. And that strengthening of our vessels is what gives us the resilience to stay present and to stay open and to keep wanting to learn and to keep wanting to show up and participate. I would love for each of you to share your call to action that you'd like to leave us with. And you can have an inner one as well as an out in the world one.
I think mine would be to read the Bhagavad Gita and to explore working in a way and making decisions in a way that's like really rooted to your like deep intuition and in a place of love and clarity. And then whilst you go about doing that action, to sacrifice the fruits of your actions to the greater whole. That would be my inner invitation. And my outer invitation would be, to check out earth.life and the membership and all the courses we have. We'll have 8 coming out every year, 8 to 10 big ones and some smaller ones, and then community events. And it's really a sort of a community of lifelong learners, unlearning, learning, transforming, embodying. And so we'd love people to join there. And then on the earth.co platform, you can donate what you feel and just start learning from these sort of short courses on very, very practical. This is how you restore your environments, because we really do have just until the end of the decade to, bend the curve on biodiversity loss, food and water, security crises, and all of the things that we know so much about already. So don't need to go into that. But yeah, it's going to take local people everywhere actively restoring environments if we are going to bend that curve.
I would add my inner outer call to action is to start swimming in the sea or any open water, body of water, whether it's rivers or lakes, whatever you're lucky enough to have access to, if you do have access to it, whenever you can, as much as possible. I find that an incredible practice to attune to something greater than yourself, but also to connect with the seasons, the elements, the coldness of the water, the warmth of the air. It completely shifts your perspectives. And so I definitely recommend that as a call to action. Another call to action would be to come together with friends that inspire you as much as possible as well, and create spaces for groups to come together.
Thank you so much. How would you like everyone to connect with you more? So Christabel, you've already shared the earth.co website, and Advaya website is now advaya.life.
Yeah, Advaya.life on the website and Advaya.life on Instagram, and earth.co online and earth.co on Instagram. And we also do a stage at Medicine Festival. So you can come to Medicine Festival. We'll hopefully do more in-person events again with Advaya as well. So it's so important for us. So next year, hopefully, we'll be doing some.
Amazing. Thank you so much to both of you for the work that you're doing in the world and for everything that you've shared with us here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Amisha. It's been so great to be on the podcast after listening to it for so many years.
Thank you, Amisha.
Thank you for listening. We hope that you have enjoyed this episode and it has sparked some inspiration and creativity in you. As always, you can find links to everything we mention in this episode, download our book, and discover so much more over on allthatweare.org. We give space to our guests to share their perspective without debating it or fact-checking, as this approach allows for deep, unedited conversations from the heart. We trust your discernment and wisdom to take what is useful and challenge what isn't in your own understanding. We offer spaces for discussion and integration in our membership community, which we would love for you to join. We don't believe in selling you things you don't need through this podcast, and so it's made possible by you, our beautiful community. If you loved this and would like to connect more deeply with us, please join our membership. You choose what you contribute based on our sliding scale, and you become a patron whose support makes this podcast happen, as well as receiving access to a library of many resources and invitations to nourishing events. Please also hit subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen so others can find us. This podcast is made by an all-female global team. Me, Amisha Gadiali, producer and host, Anna Greta Folderbach, who crafts the words that accompany each episode, and Mary Chan, who edits the sound so skillfully. All That We Are celebrates all that we are already and the untapped potential that lives inside us. It invites the full power of the more than human world, nature, the unseen, our ancestors, and our future generations. It reminds us that we never exist in silo, through borders, timelines, or polarity, that in each and every moment, all that we are is here.